Today is Wednesday, March 19th. We're talking about the latest rulings that seem to pit the White House against some judges and what the U.S. Supreme Court's Chief Justice has to say about it, and what progress has and hasn't been made in a deal between Ukraine and Russia. Also, an epic journey ends with a splashdown. 2 NASA astronauts have finally returned home from an extended stay in space. Plus, new efforts to crack down on baby formulas, a lawsuit pitting tennis players against the associations that pay them, and which dog breed is becoming much more popular here in the U.S. Those stories and even more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. President Trump is facing new setbacks in courtrooms around the country as more of his actions are put on hold. Just yesterday, a federal judge weighed in on Trump's cost-cutter Elon Musk and his Doge team shutting down USAID. He said the moves were likely unconstitutional on many fronts, including the role Musk played, saying he acted as a U.S. officer without having been properly appointed. The judge ordered some of the agency's work to be restored, and he banned Musk from dealing with the agency personally. This isn't actually expected to save USAID, though, since Secretary of State Marco Rubio has also promised cuts, and he was confirmed by the U.S. Senate. Still, the White House said rogue judges are going against the will of the American people in stopping President Trump's agenda. Also yesterday, another federal judge blocked the Trump administration's effort to ban transgender Americans from the military. In her strongly worded opinion, she said it was a cruel irony that thousands of transgender service members have sacrificed their lives to make sure others get the same rights they're being denied. But in President Trump's executive order, he called being transgender a falsehood that's inconsistent with the humility and selflessness required of a service member. And after the hearing on this case, the Justice Department filed a complaint against the judge, accusing her of misconduct. The DOJ is expected to appeal. As the White House calls out what it refers to as activist judges, the U.S. Supreme Court's Chief Justice is calling out President Trump, even without actually saying his name. Specifically, Chief Justice John Roberts addressed Trump's calls for certain judges to be impeached. Roberts issued a rare statement to say impeachment is not an appropriate response to disagreeing with a ruling. That's what appeals are for. But even after that, Trump went on Fox News to say the judge who tried to block deportation flights needs to be impeached, and that as president, he's only doing what voters elected him to do, and judges should not get in the way of that. House Republicans have already introduced impeachment resolutions against at least 3 judges because of their decisions in Trump cases. And it would only take a simple House majority to move forward, though removal from office would still need a 2/3 majority in the Senate. Only 15 judges have ever been impeached in U.S. history. 8 have been removed from office. For about 2 hours, President Trump spoke with Russia's President Vladimir Putin. And in the end, Putin still would not agree to a full ceasefire in Ukraine. But he did agree to stop attacks on energy infrastructure. And that's considered an important first step. Since last year, Ukraine's President Zelensky said about 80% of his country's energy infrastructure had been destroyed by Russian bombs. In retaliation, Ukraine has been targeting oil and gas facilities deep into Russian territory, too. But all of it would stop under this deal. At this point, Zelensky says he supports a ceasefire on energy assets, and he's going to share more of his thoughts at a news conference today. The Pentagon is the latest government agency to announce mass job cuts. Over the next few months, it's planning to push out 50,000 to 60,000 civilian workers through either firings or resignations. Officials say they're working to make sure these cuts don't impact the readiness of the U.S. military. Still, it means thousands of veterans are likely to lose their jobs, not just because of cuts at the Pentagon, but also because the Veterans Affairs Department wants to get rid of 80,000 workers beginning this summer. Another part of the federal government facing big cuts, the Internal Revenue Service. The IRS is reportedly looking to cut up to half of its 100,000-person workforce. And with that, the Wall Street Journal says some of the biggest audits are going to have to end. Some critics within the IRS see this as counterproductive, saying weaker enforcement will just mean less money coming into the federal government, that there will be much more money lost than what the government is saving in personnel costs. Some Trump allies have suggested using artificial intelligence to fill the auditing role. But at this point, the Treasury has paused technology upgrades at the IRS while it reviews the agency's strategy. The 2 NASA astronauts who ended up on an unexpectedly long mission in space are finally back on solid ground. Sunny Williams and Butch Wilmore returned to Earth last night, capping a 9-month stay at the International Space Station, fraught with some uncertainty and technical troubles. But there was an upside. In the time they spent on the ISS, they worked on roughly 150 science experiments that NASA says will be instrumental in the future of human space travel. They also fixed equipment and went on spacewalks. Then yesterday, they safely made the journey back to Earth in a SpaceX capsule that splash landed off the coast of Florida. It was a celebratory moment, both in the capsule and back at Mission Control. A school of dolphins even showed up and swam alongside as it was pulled back to the main recovery ship. Now they're getting some routine health checks before they can go back home to their families. We have more news for you still coming up. But first, this episode of The Newsworthy is sponsored by BetterHelp. Therapy can feel like a big investment, but I believe just like you probably invest in keeping up with your physical health, it's worth it to invest in your mental health too. And just like with working out, there are now high quality but more affordable options you can get from home. If cost is what's holding you back, let me tell you about BetterHelp. You pay a flat fee for weekly sessions that save you money compared to traditional in-person therapy. And either way, honestly, in my experience, therapy pays for itself because I can run a better business and live a better life overall when I have positive coping skills, appropriate boundaries, and am overall able to feel like my best self more often. With over 30,000 therapists, BetterHelp is the world's largest online therapy platform, having served over 5 million people globally. It's convenient. You can join a session with the click of a button, helping you fit therapy into your busy life too. Plus, you can switch therapists at any time. Your well-being is worth it. Visit betterhelp.com/newsworthy today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/newsworthy. Now back to the news. Tens of thousands of files related to the Kennedy assassination were just released. Historians say it's going to take some time to go through them all to search for any new revelations, especially since a lot of the documents are handwritten, blurred, or otherwise tough to read. But they expect the basic circumstances to stay the same, that a single gunman, Lee Harvey Oswald, killed President John F. Kennedy as his motorcade traveled through Dallas in 1963. This latest release adds to the 300,000 pages of JFK files that were already released. If you want to look through the records yourself, we've added a link in today's episode notes. Remember how last year the Surgeon General under then-President Biden called gun violence a public health crisis? Well, the Trump administration removed that declaration, along with the entire webpage related to it that included things like firearm risk prevention strategies and mental health action and support. The Health and Human Services Department says it took down this site to comply with one of President Trump's executive orders that directed his administration to review any moves the Biden administration made to infringe on Second Amendment rights. When the original advisory first came out last year, it had support from at least 10 national medical organizations like the American Medical Association and American Academy of Pediatrics. It called for proper gun storage, universal background checks, assault weapons bans, and more. But the White House has said President Trump has better ways to make America safe by empowering law enforcement to uphold law and order. Already, President Trump cut the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, and more changes are still expected. Baby formulas are about to get more scrutiny from the federal government. The FDA announced it's stepping up testing for heavy metals. It's also going to be doing a deeper review of nutrients required in formulas that are used to feed millions of babies. Consumer Reports shared some concerning test results just this week, saying it found potentially harmful chemicals in roughly half of the 41 baby formulas it tested, chemicals like arsenic, BPA, and lead. When formula companies were asked about these findings, they explained, saying they have their own rigorous testing protocols to make sure their products are within regulatory limits. They also made it clear they never add chemicals to their products on purpose, and that heavy metals in the food supply are not just an issue with baby formulas. Google just made its largest acquisition ever, paying $32 billion cash for the cybersecurity startup Wiz. The startup is only 5 years old, but Google CEO says half the Fortune 100 companies use Wiz's technology to secure their cloud applications. So this is expected to boost Google's cloud business too. And it's expected to help Google compete with Microsoft, which also sells security software. The deal is expected to close next year, assuming it can clear the regulatory hurdles. Professional tennis players are starting to sue the tours they play for. New legal action is coming from the New Professional Players Association that was co-founded by legendary tennis star Novak Djokovic. It sued both the ATP that runs the men's tour and the WTA that runs the women's tour. The lawsuit criticizes the schedule, ranking systems, and control over image rights. Plus, it brings up issues with the kinds of balls they use, among other things. Specifically, it says, quote, professional tennis players are stuck in a rigged game that gives them limited control over their own careers, and it's asking for financial compensation. The ATP Tour says there's no merit to the case and that it's actually been trying to make reforms to benefit players, but the players' union has instead chosen division. The WTA called the legal action regrettable and misguided. Both tours say they plan to defend themselves in court. It seems Americans still have a soft spot in their hearts for the longtime favorite dog breeds, but there is a newcomer becoming more popular. The American Kennel Club released its annual rankings that show for the third year in a row, the French Bulldog is America's favorite breed. That's followed by Labrador Retrievers, Golden Retrievers, German Shepherds, and Poodles. But the Cane Corso has gone from 50th to 14th on the list in just a decade. The breed is big and strong and athletic. The AKC says they're intensely loyal to their humans, but are also assertive and willful, so it's recommended they get a lot of socialization with other dogs and humans early on. Of course, a lot of personality traits depend on the dog itself. Advocacy groups will point out there are plenty of lovable mixed breeds and purebreds that are always up for adoption in the nation's shelters. And that's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Work Wednesday, when we break down one interesting career or work-related news story every Wednesday. But first, this episode is brought to you by Honeylove. If you don't know already, I'm a big fan of Honeylove for a lot of reasons. First, I just appreciate how so much thought goes into everything they make. It's like they've fixed all my past complaints about leggings, shapewear, and bras. The Legging 2.0 are the perfect leggings with just the right amount of shaping, a great breathable soft fabric, convenient but not too bulky pockets, and more. The shapewear distinguishes between areas you want more support and areas you want less compression, and they never roll up or down. The list goes on. So knowing Honeylove always thinks about function, feel, and fashion in everything they make, it comes as no surprise to me. This is a brand designed by women who actually wear the products to know that they're good. I also appreciate that their messaging and products are always inclusive of different types of bodies. So treat yourself to the most comfortable bra, best shapewear, and go-to leggings, and save 20% off site-wide at honeylove.com/newsworthy. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off, honeylove.com/newsworthy. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, so please support our show and tell them we sent you. Treat yourself to Honeylove because you deserve it. Okay, now back to Work Wednesday. A record number of Americans are now working multiple jobs. It's a trend called overemployment. The latest data from the federal government shows nearly 9 million Americans are doing double duty or more. That's roughly 5.5% of the workforce, and it amounts to the highest rate since the Great Recession in 2009. The Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis says about half of the people who work more than one job have a college degree, and still having 2 or more jobs might not pay off that much. The Fed found overemployed Americans had a yearly average income of about $58,000, just $1,000 more than those with one job. The chief economist at ZipRecruiter told CNBC there's a few reasons people choose overemployment. One, there's opportunity, since more flexible remote jobs lend themselves to a side hustle, like driving for Uber or delivering groceries through Instacart. But it's also driven by necessity, since wages haven't kept up with inflation. A lot of Americans really do need a second job to cover expenses, pay off debt, and so on. Either way, economists say the job market is still stronger than it was throughout most of the 1990s and 2000s. And with that, the overemployment trend is expected to continue. Well, thank you so much for listening today and for sharing the show. We'll be back tomorrow with more news. Until then, have a great day.